better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll.
Broadcasting live from Orc City, it's Dungeon Master of None.
We love Orc City, don't we, Matt? We love also being the architect that oversees its very destruction sometimes. Sometimes you got to be an elf king and you got to destroy an Orc City. But here in Orc City, new Orc City, we like to have a good time. Hey, if you like Orc Cities, go back and listen to our episode on Bright. It's a doozy.
When we were still figuring out what this podcast was, and we're like, oh, what if we reviewed Netflix's Bright, because it's kind of like Shadowrun.
I still think that's what this podcast is about.
No, it is.
We haven't had anything nearly as good as Netflix's Bright to review.
We're never going to get another Bright. A Bright only comes around. If it's a success, I think it'll be our Star Wars.
It will be our Star Wars.
Today,
hello everyone.
Hello, I'm Dungeon Master Matt.
I'm Dungeon Master Rob.
We're giving you some Dungeon Master advice that you requested. We're answering your Dungeon Master questions via the medium of letters.
That's right. Through rain and snow and dark of night, your mail has arrived, and we are going to answer it.
Let's get things started off with some letters from our Patreons, which you can join at patreon.com/dungeonmasterofnone. Our first letter comes from Brooke. Brooke writes, how do you deal with scheduling issues? How do you address a player who is frequently absent, even when every time they're very, very sorry and promise it will never happen again, etc., etc., etc.? Sometimes a player missing is not a big deal, but sometimes it makes things a lot less fun for everyone at the table. I try to let everyone have the spotlight now and again, and if I balance an encounter around, quote, the wizard is super excited they just learned Fireball, or the archer can handle the flying enemy that will give everyone else fits, or whatever, and then they aren't there, everyone else getting me at my improv bad instead of at my over-prepared best. Brooke.
This is a good question, Brooke, and a common one. We've actually talked about this or around this, Matt and I have recently in a couple of episodes, because Matt recently had to make some dramatic scheduling changes, and so did I, just around this. So, Matt, what was your solution regarding scheduling issues?
My solution is, if you have a player who's like, I want to come, but then never makes it, I just put it out of my mind. I just, I can't prepare that that player's story that connects to their background, and I just won't. And then, for me, those people show up every 2 months, right? And I'm like, great, it's so great to have you. And it doesn't matter that you're gone. We'll just jump you back in. Everyone will catch you up on the story so far. Perfect. I just let it go.
I got to agree with Matt. I have dealt with precisely this issue, Brooke, in 2 recent games that I have run. And it's a nice person. It's someone who I like, who has come
they're
to
my
my
friends.
Games,
what am I going to do?
Who has come to my game before, and every week they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't make it. And I feel bad, but at the end of the day, all I can do is, try to consider the other 3 to 4 to 5 people at my table and me. I am a person worthy of consideration. And so I don't think that they mean anything by it. I don't think that it is a slight on me, but all I can do is, like Matt said, put it out of my mind and run the games on the days that I'm available and other people are available and hope for the best. This is hard for me too. I deeply sympathize because I'm an includer by nature. I'm inclusive. I want everyone to have a chance to play and have fun. And I sometimes twist myself into knots trying to make that happen. But the truth is that that's extremely taxing for me, and also sometimes annoying for other people if I'm moving days or shifting things around. And so, truthfully, the best thing to do is to say, this is the day that we're meeting, and if your friend can't make it, they can't make it. Regarding the special balanced encounters, I'm sure you've heard us say this a bunch of times, and so I maybe don't need to tell you, but you're gonna have to be flexible with those. I recently, again, this is all very familiar, Brooke, because I did the exact same thing that you did. I prepared a very special special scenario in Mothership that one of my players I knew was gonna like, and then suddenly he was consistently not there for the 3 weeks leading up to it, and then we just did it without him. And you know what? It actually ended up being fine. I think that actually it was okay, but I had to adjust some things, and I was like, I probably shouldn't have put quite so much effort into that specific thing. And so, that's a lesson that I have to keep learning. But yeah,
or when the people who were not interested still solved or in some way overcame that encounter.
That's right.
Maybe it was more interesting than it would have been, right? I'm thinking of your flying enemy archer. Yeah. If the players came up with some other way of dealing with that, yeah, great.
Yeah, as it turns out, they did not need the xenobotanist to deal with the ship full of hostile plants, and it was actually a lot more interesting that he wasn't there. So it worked out just fine.
Listen, I'm operating under the assumption that this person is your friend or someone you like, right? And I think that's always the best assumption to operate on. And when I have those people at my table who are my friends or that I like or I want to be my friends, it's just like, hey, it's a nice treat when you can show up. Yeah. That's good enough for me. Honestly, we all have got things going on. It's great. The difference is if this is some kind of like pickup game with like strangers that you met in looking for group form, my standards change dramatically for those.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. But friends, hey, just whenever you can make it, buddy.
Listen, everyone, it's not 1977 anymore, and we're not all a bunch of insurance salesmen with wives who take care of children and meals and things, and we have nothing to do but play D&D in our basements, right? We're all modern men and women, and we have responsibilities, and it's hard. Scheduling is hard, but the part of the we are GM advocates on this podcast, and you are a player too, a player who unfortunately usually has the burden of scheduling and management. So don't overwork yourself. Just do your best. But try to let go of that stress. I say this all again, Brooke. To be clear, I've done the exact same thing that you've described in the last month. So it's not like it's not like this is a thing that goes away. But it's all the only thing you can do is just try to work with it.
The last thing I'll do is I will make a mental note of the people who are like, this is a common occurrence in their life. And nothing like against their players, just like I know that there's only a 30% chance that this person will be there, even though they said they will probably be there. That's fine. Perfect. Yeah. Now that note is made. I keep that in mind when planning, and then if I'm wrong, I'm pleasantly surprised, and it's great.
Same. Thanks for writing, Brooke. That was a good question. Yeah. Our next one comes from Whiskey Jack, and Whiskey Jack writes, another patron, thank you. Not an advice question, so it might not be in the spirit of the episode. That's okay. You're a special patron, so you can ask anything you want. I've recently become obsessed with stringing together a handful of games leading into a campaign of Daggerheart. Microscope into Kingdom, into For the Queen, into Daggerheart. What is your gaming white whale? Ooh. What is your unrealistic dream campaign to run or be a part of?
Oh, yeah.
I have one of these, yeah.
Of course we both have one of these.
Yeah, we both have one of these, yeah.
I mean, my biggest white whale is the... I don't think I've talked exactly about this before on the podcast, but it's a complete alternate universe history of the BattleTech empire told through role-playing games.
You've mentioned something like this, but not, yes. Yeah.
And it will never happen, and I'm sad about it because I like to play in person. None of my in-person friends really give two... shits about BattleTech, which is fine. But I have all the miniatures for it. I have all the plans for it, but I know it will never happen. And not only does it include an alternate universe where we do a season of a campaign that is at the dramatic turning point and we don't know what will happen, but all the campaigns will then take place in the same continuity from the starting off point of the original BattleTech box set, and then we go from there and we see what happens and we retell the entire history of the universe, and then integrated with that is an open-ended sort of Bronstein-like game that I once ran online a board game of my own design for the greater strategic moves of the state, and that would integrate with the nitty-gritty pilot action of the role-playing game. It would be very cool, but it will never happen.
That would be really cool. And never say never, Matt. You never know. Someday.
Yeah. Someday when we're all in a nursing home together,
I was going to say,
it just happens to
maybe
be
when we're all in a retirement
Battletech
home.
friends.
Yeah, we can do this. I think I've mentioned mine before. I almost tried it and I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't. And then I sort of was like, this was a bad idea. I can never do it. I still think it might be a bad idea, but I still want to do it. And it's like The Matrix, right?
Yeah.
I want to start a game, a classic bog standard fantasy adventure, with everybody's playing a very Red Wizard, whatever, and something happens and they discover that they're in a simulation and they go down one level, and then the system changes. Suddenly they're playing Cyberpunk or something. They wake up in some, I don't know, somewhere, and they're in a different body, and they've got to and then they go down another level.
But they're the same soul, the same.
They're the same soul,
they're
the same person, and
Right.
they're different interpretations of the same character. It would all be different role-playing game systems is the thing.
That's
and,
fun. The Eternal Champions, right? But through a Matrix. Wait, what's at the bottom level?
I haven't.
Can you reveal that?
They wake up. They wake up in the real world. I don't know. It's mostly it kind of depends on how far
they're
I
in
take the
a
conceit.
far future. What's that game? Assassin's Creed, and
that's right.
That's what the simulation was. It's back through their blood memories,
something like that. Yeah, I depends on how far I want to take it, but they'd eventually wake up in a creche or pull some wires out somewhere and find out that they're reliving ancestral memories or part of a eons long experiment, and have to
end it.
End it exactly.
Maybe
end
it's
it,
better
or
than reality.
Become its new masters or something. But it really depends on how long it goes before I get bored. But the idea the key thing is every time they enter a new world or go down a level, it's a new entirely new system, right? They'd be playing an entirely new TTRPG, which would be an insane thing to ask any player group to do, but I would still think it would be fun.
No, I think Whiskey Jack, you have a great white whale in that yours
is very
seems
achievable.
Yes. The first 2 steps are 2 nights of gaming. So that you're halfway there after 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then the other 2 are just campaigns.
Yeah.
I think your white whale, you can get it, you can stab at it from Hell's Heart,
That's right. You should try it. Yeah. Yours is a lot more reasonable, I also have I have imagined doing something with one fewer step, a microscope into a small campaign of something into a larger campaign. And one of my white whales is combining some tactical strategic board gaming. I would, once I finally get my miniatures, I would love to do a trench crusade combat into a role playing game in the world, something like that. But those are smaller. But
for me, it's always something similar. It's that idea of combining a very old school strategic war game with a game master that's still kind of played like a role playing game, except it's at that high kingdom or state level, but with a few more formalizations and rules. Then we switch perspective, and now we're doing a role-playing game on the ground, and then we go back, and so that the entire string of campaigns tells some kind of entire world history.
Matt, have you played that old school Star Trek strategic the
fleet battles?
Battles?
Yeah, you can't see it behind me because it's too low on the shelf, but there's a bunch of Star Trek Fleet Battles books there.
Those are old school. I was you could absolutely roll those into a Star Trek campaign, but you'd have to be dedicated. Those are crunchy.
You'd have to also really care about Star Trek fleet battles, which I can't find we've only seen like 3 in the series, and they're all super. I guess the Dominion War one was kind of cool, but all the other ones are kind of boring. It's just like, that doesn't matter to me about Star Trek, but with something like BattleTech, like,
it does matter.
The maneuvers of princes and princesses and archons and coordinators and things, that I care about.
The BattleTech battles are really cool. They are very compelling in a way that the Star Trek fleet battles are not. Great question, Whiskey Jack. Thanks for writing.
Yeah. We'll have to share some other white whales on a future episode.
Yeah.
Thank you, patrons, for your letters. Our next one comes from Joel. Joel is asking about some scale and some XP or HP, one of our second favorite Ps. Love your pod, guys. I love the reviews of systems. I've already convinced my group to play Blades in the Dark and Triangle Agency. Thanks to you guys. I think we're going to try some Dragon Slayers next, probably Daggerheart.
Good choices.
I'm hoping you guys can settle a debate for me.
Probably not, but we'll try.
Most of my players are part-time GMs, and we couldn't agree on whether the GM should scale every encounter for the party's level. There's no way for the PCs to tell how powerful an opponent is except for the GM's description, sometimes explicit warnings. If every encounter is balanced so that the boss kills a player in 2 hits regardless of their level or HP pool, is there any point in leveling up and increasing HP? If every enemy has an HP pool large enough for 3 rounds of average damage from the party, is there any point in the party rolling damage at all? Maybe this is the strength of a more ambiguous HP systems like Harm from other games. In the fiction of a game, you can have players believe that certain enemies are too strong for them, but this only works until higher levels of D&D play. Once players reach level 15 in D&D, they have every right to believe they can take on Archmages, Archliches, Archdevils, all the Arcs. When you're fighting fantastic fictional creatures, there's really no measuring stick that players can use other than the trust between the player and the GM. If the players trust the GM isn't going to throw anything too tough in front of them, they will never know when something is too difficult. Anecdotally, the problem I'm currently having is the opposite of enemies being too tough. The party is level 16 and constantly hitting super deadly encounters that my party completely whomps. Then they get their asses handed to them by a CR8 ghost. That's from Joel.
Joel, this is a very good question.
Okay, can we fix this debate? Should the party be at a balanced level with enemies?
I'm of 2 minds about this. So this is partially like a system question, right? So we've discussed this at length, and the problem with a system like 5e or Pathfinder, but especially 5e, is that combat takes forever. It's also a problem because explicitly 5e combat is balanced for many encounters a day. I forget the number every time we talk about it, but it's upwards
6.
of it's 6, right? I've never achieved that. I have never had in a decade of running 5e games. I've tried. I don't know, maybe I'll get 3 or 4, but 6, never. I do feel like you have to adjust the encounters up a little bit so that they're more interesting. A counter to this, or a corollary, is that one thing that I like about OSR systems, Shadow Dark, and others is that I can have a lot more encounters. And I sometimes do get 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 encounters a day. And sometimes they're like dinky guys that my players stomp and they have fun. But like every encounter is like a challenge and a risk because that's a highly deadly system. So it's more balanced. And if you could run the right number of encounters in 5e without everyone becoming incredibly bored and tired, then you would not need to adjust the encounters upward. But you have to be realistic about the time that you have and the what you're working with, which isn't going to resolve the debate.
Well,
sorry.
Okay, so that Rob has given us a lawyer's non-answer here.
I sure have.
So the question, right? Should encounters be balanced so that it's interesting but not insurmountable challenge for the players? And if so, what's the point of anything? Well, I would say that the system design of specifically like D&D 3E, 4E, and 5E is, yes, to have this fun encounter treadmill where encounters get more complicated, but really nothing changes. And that's the point, is to have fun encounters, and you have to like having those big fights. And I think, let's see, Joel used the term superheroes, right? It's D&D is like a superhero game, right? Superman fights a thing, and it's tough, but he can overcome it, right? But the fight is cool and pull off some cool spells and maneuvers. I think that's the point. And if you're so it's a question. So I think the answer is yes. 5e, you're doing things the right way, balancing the encounters. However, if you want to play a different style of game, you need to move to a different system. If you move to Mothership, then the encounters are not balanced at all. Some of them are a bunch of pirate raiders that your players wipe out with their laser cannon in 2 seconds. And then other times it's a noble AI ghost that they run away from.
That's right. So, yeah, I think the answer, I agree with Matt. I think generally the answer is yes, just given the constraints. For what it's worth, regarding your anecdote at the end, this has always been the case for me. Is I'll throw a truly insane encounter at my players, and they will just absolutely just soar through it without even breaking a sweat, and then they'll run into something that was, I had barely given any consideration to, and it will knock half of them unconscious. This is the way of D&D. And this is also part of my sort of my non-answer is that it's difficult to balance encounters in Dungeons and Dragons. We have mentioned things like ghosts and shadows, but there are other creatures that are, of a relatively low CR that will challenge a party that is not prepared for them immensely. And this has been the case for several editions, and it has not changed. So even if you are trying, it can be a challenge to properly balance an encounter. So don't sweat it too much.
I mean, only the fool, Rob, enters into a debate that someone else is having with their friends and tries to pick a side. The wise man says, actually, no, it's this cool third thing.
That's right.
So my non-serious but kind of serious answer is check out this cool third thing, which is, if you haven't read a short blog post by Sage LaTorra, for the writer of Dungeon World, called A 16 HP Dragon, you should read that. And I think the advice only applies to fiction first games, but considering that you're considering playing Daggerheart next, I think the blog post, A 16 HP Dragon, which is, again, a small number of HP, even for Dungeon World, makes for a very, very interesting fight that is, in that type of system, exactly what a fight should be about.
Yeah, and I always want to steer away from our advice being play a different system. But since you are considering Daggerheart, one of the things that I like about it is that it makes balancing encounters a lot easier. You will run into it, theoretically. I haven't tested this as extensively as I would like to, but I feel like you will run into this problem less with Daggerheart than you will with D&D.
But I agree. Like the point of D&D is that in its modern incarnation is that fights are either balanced and easy or balanced and to be very, very, very difficult. And that's the point of what the system is trying to do. And so for D&D, for your question, you should embrace it.
Thank you for writing, Joel. Appreciate your question. Let us know if this was helpful and if we managed to settle the debate. All right. Our next one comes from Josh. Josh writes, "Hello, DMs of None. Thanks for the 5e Clones episodes. Really enlightening. One of the things that stood out about the discussion is that none of the systems seem to have introduced substantial role-playing mechanics, e.g. mixed successes, random life paths, Dungeon World's bonds, or pretty much everything in Blades in the Dark. I mean, mechanics we would call fiction first. Now, like Rob, I'm biased. I've played enough 2nd through 5th edition D&D, and I'm done with it, so I guess I was hoping for more radical changes. But to be honest, most of the systems seem to be hacks any experienced DM could incorporate, and this led me to wonder again whether I'm an outlier or part of a silent majority minority. Does the similarity of these systems indicate that the D&D style, I'd call it superhero fantasy, is overwhelmingly popular? Or is the explosion of clones similar to what happens in board games when dozens of designers converge on similar mechanics, and the low barrier to entry and Kickstarter FOMO leads to the majority of purchased games never getting more than a couple of plays? And anyway, why do you think these systems didn't incorporate role-playing? As always, thanks, Josh.
My
Good question.
I think this is a great question to ask.
It's a very smart question, Josh. You put a lot of very insightful things in this, so thank you for writing.
My personal theory is that the people who are, one, good at writing like a fun life path system or a cool role-playing mechanic like bonds, are just already doing their own thing. They're going to make their own system from the ground up. And that it's, you have to look at what's the right term? The hagiography of this crop of clone designers, of Dragon Slayer designers. And they're all people who made their chops making 5e content. Or whether that's review videos like our podcast, or supplements for 5e, and they just wish that 5e could be different, and they're not exactly sure why. And so they made it their 5e house rule system.
I think you're onto something in your last paragraph, Josh, where you suggested that, similar mechanics, low barrier to entry, and Kickstarter FOMO means that a bunch of games get funded but never get played. In our Kickstarter episode, we took a look at a lot of the high performing Kickstarters, and there's no way to know how many of those are still getting played, but of a lot of the really popular, very successful Kickstarters, only Lancer has a very active subreddit, and many people
Lancer didn't even make $1 million. It made like 200,000.
But it is, and again, our imprecise way of measuring this, it's more popular. It has more supplements and players and engagement than any of its peer games. And I think this is very similar to what's happening with these 5e clones. Look, a lot of people, myself included, have $20, $40, $50 to throw at 2 or 3 or 4 games, maybe even one a month. I've funded a lot of things. I try not to throw as much money at Kickstarter as I used to, but again, it's not that much money for a lot of people. And so, if you got a few tens of thousands of people who are interested in this type of thing, which absolutely there are, then it's not hard to imagine that a lot of the same people are just funding these clones and hoping that one of them turns out to be good. Also, like Matt said, a lot of these people made their chops doing this type of thing, and so they have a built-in audience that is interested in precisely this.
Yeah. I think it is funny that the people who did come up this way but have made something completely different, like their own game that maybe takes a little bit of inspiration 5e, are probably the ones that people are going to be playing longer. Like the Lancer system, it's clearly inspired by 5e, and especially 4e, someone who grew up playing recent Dungeons & Dragons, but made their own completely new system. It's one that people still play, even if it didn't raise as much money on Kickstarter. I
mean, I don't think there are going to be more than a dozen tables of people playing DC 20 in, a couple of years, despite it making
$2 million.
Millions of dollars.
$2.24 million.
And maybe I'm wrong. I don't think that's going to really make a big dent in 5e's player base. Some people will like it. A lot of people I think will try it. But I think that it's probably not going to, like most of these, probably not going to have a lot of staying power.
The other interesting thing that Josh brought up is that basically all of the clones that we reviewed leaned into the sort of mechanics of skills, spells, and especially combat and character creation, but like mechanical character creation.
Yeah.
And almost none of them provided more, I guess, like role-playing mechanics. And, I think that's maybe just the 5e style. Lots of people are fine and happy with a game without that, right? But it was an interesting gap. I'm not sure why that exists. It seems like a pretty obvious, like, let's make 5e, but take the newest of the new school design and add it to it.
Right. I mean, there's a common piece of advice among creatives, which is don't draw attention to a better piece of art with your art. And I don't know that it's precisely better, but if your approach, if your game is we're going to do D&D 5e tactical combat but better, is your game better than MCDM's Draw Steel? Like does it do that better, right? And yes, I know they're not all trying to do the same thing, but like I feel like one of my major objections to all of these games is that it had already been done better by somebody else. And again, there's some disagreement on that, but I think everyone was sort of like rushing to fill the same gap, and the result is, a lot of samey games that lack, in my opinion, ambition or differentiators or anything like that.
Yeah. It was certainly an interesting moment in TTRPG history, and thanks for reflecting on it with us, Josh.
Sorry, one last thought, Josh.
Yeah.
And it's just that I don't know either if everybody loves this stuff and I'm the outlier, or if we're part of a silent majority. To me, like Matt, it seems obvious. Like, why not pull from some of the decades of other games, of RPG innovations that we have, things that are good that work, right? Why not put clocks in D&D? Like, why not do life paths? Like simple things to like make it more nuanced and complex, that in interesting ways, without making it like annoying and crunchy. And again, like you said, none of them did this, and I don't have an answer. It feels like a real blind spot in all of these games. So
hey, maybe there's room for one more, Josh. Time to design the new school fiction first D&D Heartbreaker. Though I think that might be Daggerheart. So
I think that's Daggerheart.
We'll have
the
to
thing.
come back to it. Maybe we'll revisit all of these in another year. Speaking of, we have another letter on a similar topic. This one's from Clint. Today I listened to your 5e Heartbreakers episode. In it, you frequently talk about the shortcomings of 5e, but you never explain exactly what those are. I understand this was outside the scope of the episode, but it made me wonder if there's a different episode where you explain what you think is bad about 5e. Thanks, and keep up the good work. I think there's a couple episodes where we talk about D&D shortcomings. The one that comes to mind is, I think it's from 5 years ago, that's like, do we need a 6th edition?
Yeah.
Where we talk, okay, yes, we'll eventually get a 6th edition. And I think Rob completely predicts exactly what the revised 5th edition would be. And then we talk extensively about why you would want to create a new edition and what we would personally like out of it.
I was cynical and I was right, and I don't enjoy that. We can talk about it. There's a lot of reasons, and I often feel bad doing this because we talk shit about 5e all the time, and a lot of people like it, and it is better in many ways than what came before. We have softened on 4e, but it made improvements over that. It made improvements over 3.5.
Oh, for sure.
A very smart friend of mine said something to me recently that like kind of blew my mind, where he said that 5e is an exceptions-based rule set. As opposed to, we were talking about Pathfinder and D. So Pathfinder is a rules-based game, right? Like everything has
There
a
are
rule.
rules.
There are rules, and if you follow, there's logic to it. Does that make sense?
It's not NAM, Rob. There are rules.
There are rules. There's logic to it, right? Like
Yeah.
you know, if this then that, like, you know, an action is a this type of action, a spell is a this type of spell, and like almost everything falls into these rules. Once you understand the rules, you can intuit how anything is going to work. It's harder because you have to know the rules, but once you do, everything falls together. But 5e,
But like in 5e, every class ability, every spell can work in a completely different way, right? It's like, all right, for this spell, you'll pull out a D100 table and you'll roll on
Yes,
it,
that's
right? Maybe that was 3E confusion. Maybe it doesn't. I don't think it works that way anymore.
It's not that
but
bad
yeah,
in 5e,
but
but
like
it's similar.
for
It's,
the Paladins feature, it works this way,
Right.
and you can use it this many times a day. Whereas the Sorcerer feature, you look at the table and you use it this many times a day. Yeah.
Smite Evil doesn't work like Key, doesn't work like Draconic Bloodlines, doesn't work like an Animal Companion, doesn't work like Favorite Enemy. They're all these work this way and not that way. They're all, so you have to know all of the rules, how everything works, but there's no way to understand how they would work without reading them and understanding exactly the ways that they don't function like other things in 5e. And I sort of like passively understood this, but like hearing it said out that way, I'm like, oh, right.
Giving it a name.
Yeah. And I've talked about some of the specific exceptions that are very frustrating, like things like, I know I've mentioned this a bunch of times. I have not gotten over it. You have two spells. One is a standard action. One is a bonus action. You have both actions. Why can't you cast two spells? Well, because somewhere in the book it says you can't cast two spells unless one of them is a cantrip. That's I guess fine as a rule, but there's no way to know that unless you read that sentence in the book, right? That's not like, if, for example, so like in Pathfinder, the way this would work is like you would have a spell that is X number of actions, and if you don't have that many actions, you just can't do it. You know, it's balanced in a way that makes sense within the rules.
I would say that I would take your friend's very smart statement about rules versus exception-based systems and take it as a neutral value judgment. Like, it's fine. Like, I like that the sort of basic design of 5e is that something breaks one of the normal flows of the game. This spell allows you to do a thing that you can't normally do. That's kind of cool. The problem is you can't let there be too much of this. Your system needs to be really simple. And for me, the biggest flaw of 5e was either not going more rules wise or not like simplifying down the actual stuff that you need to know. Like for me, it's handing a new character a sheet and being like, well, here's your ability scores. Now, they don't matter. Here's a smaller number under them that does matter. Now, when you make a skill check, it's an ability check, except when it's not, because it is. You know, whenever I try and actually explain the rules of 5e, not through play, I sound like Adam Scott telling someone about Cones of Dunshire.
Cones of Dunshire. It is Cones of Dunshire. Well, Matt, you make a good point.
And it's a fun game. Everyone likes Cones of Dunshire, right?
but it's about the cones, Matt.
It's about the codes.
You're right that like exceptions-based is not like inherently worse or better. I clearly have a preference for just the way my mind works. I want things to sort of make sense in sort of like a framework, and that's not how D&D works. There are other games, there are like systems of thought that are exception-based, right? There's logical systems. This is clearly a thing that works, but what Matt was getting at, and one of my frequent objections, is that they've been unwilling to commit to, because some things are still rules based, some things are still making an attempt to be sort of like logical and coherent, but then they have exceptions, and so you never know entirely what you're getting with 5e, and this makes it it makes it very challenging to GM. It always has.
Yeah. It's like, here's your character sheet. Look, by the way, your attack is strength-based, but, of course, you'll have different modifiers for your attack. So we're going to write all your attacks here. And then also, the most important part of your character is really your class abilities. Those all go in this little box right here.
Right.
that you'll
You've got this
run out of
number
room
that
to-
says AC, but it doesn't work like any of these other things. So you're going to have to go to a different sheet and look at your armor and its dex and also, these things to figure out what your AC is. And
It's
your initiative,
time to roll
that's something
initiative.
else entirely.
That's
Yes.
actually just a dexterity check, but there's one feat that can modify it. So we've made it its own thing at the top here. It's just so
You might be asking, is your proficiency relevant here? No, but it is everywhere else.
So, all that being said, I still like 5e and have had a great time running it and continuing to run it. One of my other big meta objections is I think a system can be really well designed, or it can be just kind of okay, but the people who make the system make a bunch of other cool things that kind of slot into the system, like adventures and campaign settings. And over the course of 5e, there's been more just stuff that is not worth my time than there is stuff that is worth my time. And so I think if 5e, for example, over its 10-year history, had knocked it out of the park with their supplemental materials, I would have a completely different feeling about it.
This is a great point. Let's use Mothership as an example, because there's actually the real first edition is relatively new, and there's a few adventures, a few supplements, and all of them are sick. All of them have something in them that I want to read and want to implement in my games. And we have read every 5e book. We have read every single one of them. And the list of ones that I would use is very short. Again, Mothership as an example. I also like running 5e games, but my players in all of those games, some of them played games with me for 5 years or more, and they would make mistakes or forget things about their characters every time we played. Maybe I should have been pushing them harder. I don't know. But some of those same players are in my Mothership game, and nobody has made a mistake. Right. Nobody has forgotten anything. Nobody has rolled the wrong thing. Sometimes we have to take a second to figure out what the results are. But nobody has gotten confused about how to do anything in Mothership in several months of play. And the same for Shadow Dark, same for Blades in the Dark, which is a relatively complicated game. I just after playing more games and running more games, often for players that were my 5e players first, I have come to what I think is a irrefutable conclusion that 5e is a hard game to run and play.
Yeah, and I think the other frustrating thing with the redesign is that you could still redesign the system and make it better, but the problem is you couldn't make it better for everyone. Some people are attached to things that I view as flaws, like the idea of a bonus action. I was like, well, maybe they're redoing the system. They can finally get rid of this bonus action. No, actually, it's all about bonus actions now.
Did you know that? Sorry, did you know that Mike Merles agrees with you? He wrote a whole thing after he was.
Of course he does.
About how he never liked bonus actions. Once he was freed from the shackles, he finally admitted that he never liked them. Sorry,
listen.
You are right,
sometimes you're gonna agree with someone that sometimes you agree with the thumb. Listen, I think there are a couple of roads a thing can go down. It can be a just perfectly designed, cool system that makes it easy for me to run and come up with cool situations for my players and cool NPCs, and I can focus my time on that. The system can be kind of okay, but it's filled with so many support materials like Cyberpunk or Shadowrun, or really the whole corpus of D&D that I'm like, oh, wow, look at all these things. I could set this in the Forgotten Realms. How cool is that? There's all this supplemental stuff. Spelljammer. It's cool, right? But then if one of them is bad, right, you need at least one of them to be good. Is my opinion. And so again, I'm not soured on 5e. I've run it enough that these flaws don't affect my ability to be a good GM and have a good time. It's just it is a lot of extra work and it could have been better.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, I would feel so differently about 5e if every adventure they were coming out with just made me go, holy shit, what a cool adventure. What a well-designed scenario. But it just hasn't been that way. Like their best ones in the past like 4 or 5 years have been like, well, there's kind of some okay stuff. And then most of them have been like, ooh, wow, this is really seems unfun to play.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to like wax nostalgic for an era that was ultimately not that great, but like at least when we were getting like the Tome of Battle, that was interesting, right? that was fun. Yes, it was, game bloat and it was weird, but like it was a good time at least. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I won't wax nostalgic for it because I feel like I had a different mindset when I was like 17 years old, and it was like a lot of D&D was like thinking about, what if this cool imaginary person could do this cool imaginary thing in a different way? And now I care less about that.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, not to rag on you if you still care about that. I think that's a cool thing to care about. I just can't make myself do it anymore.
Yeah. I'd rather have more Tome of Battle than another rehash of, old adventures from previous editions.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like another thing that would have kept Robin is like if they had made cool player-facing stuff over the course of the edition. And you got a bunch of subclasses that I think on the whole are not that exciting because of the limitations of subclasses. And one new class, the Artificer, that I feel like, more or less was kind of not as exciting as it could be.
Yeah. So. I mean, yeah. I don't want to go too far down that road because that stuff is, that is not all what I'm that interested in anymore. But again, they kind of did it halfway. They released a bunch of subclasses and some new rules for players, but didn't really give them that much to work with. And, either do it or don't, I guess.
I think I could have got back into 5e, especially if they had just really redone the system in a new and confusing way, and it would take me 3 or 4 years to figure out why I don't like it.
Yeah,
and maybe that says something more about me than any system. It's just like, well, after 3 or 4 years, I get antsy thinking about the mechanics of the system, and I wish they were different, but I can't express how. And then I move on. So they needed to be new, so I could start that cycle again.
That would have worked on me too. They really messed it up because I think this is how they kept all of us in for so long. Is like we'd start to realize that we didn't like it, and then they'd give us a new one, and we'd have to spend years playing to realize we don't like it. It's a good system. It makes sense.
Listen, we've spent a lot of time over the last couple months ragging on WotC, but it's really hard to make people happy. It is. In some ways I feel for them, even though they definitely made the wrong decision. There might not have been a right decision, but there was definitely a wrong decision or many wrong decisions, and they made one of them. Yeah. I think it would have been more interesting for them to just release a new edition that like sucked. It would have been a lot more fun.
I think it would have been
for
so
me.
much fun. They should have gone on a whole. They should have just done something totally bonkers. That would have been.
That would
everyone would be
cool.
so mad, but that would have been funny at least.
I know. And then like if it was really bad, you'd still have some people who insisted it was the best system ever made, and that would be fun. And if it was actually like kind of good but no one liked it, then we could be the cool defenders of it. There's so many possibilities for opinions to be
so
had.
So much more interesting.
And at the end of the day, isn't that what role-playing games are really about?
It's about arguing with your friends about stupid rules.
Yeah. Exception-based rule systems. Okay. Thanks.
Really
for the
good
letter,
questions. Thank you, Clint.
Thanks for listening and sounding like you started your DM of None journey with our 5e Heartbreakers episode. So welcome to the show.
This one comes from Matt, different Matt. Hey, gents. Just wanted to check in and say y'all are still doing a great job and love listening to all your shows. The last few years of life have kept me heads down and not active in the chat, but I'm still here. My group is still meeting weekly despite moving to Vancouver, Canada for a year and all the other life events of a bunch of guys in their 40s. Over the last few months, one of the other players has been GMing a game of Old Gods of Appalachia. It's been fun to stretch into a new system for a bit. Next time I write, I'll give you an update about how I managed to run a near weekly D&D game at my last job as part of team building. It was part of my pitch to get transferred to Vancouver for the year to help start up a new office. And it worked. Hope all is well and keep it up. Matt from North Carolina.
Matt, I'm so glad you were able to parlay your GMing skills into, I'm assuming, a cooler job in a cool city that is the future in Gattaca, or many of our low budget sci-fi.
That's right.
The Highlander TV show.
The very fine early 2000s sci-fi time travel
architecture
continuum. That was great. One of my favorite shows.
And also Old Gods of Appalachia, which we've never talked about on the show, sounds really cool, right? That one's by Monty Cook Games.
That's
and
Monty
it's
Cook.
maybe the first role-playing game system that's based on a podcast, so we have to show podcast solidarity for
I actually don't know why this hasn't come up yet. I didn't back it, but I'm interested in it. We should talk about it. It looks cool. It
looks super cool.
The things that Monty Cook does. This is funny because a couple of times in my life, people have suggested that I do the same thing, or even said, would you like to DM a game for my team as part of like a corporate offsite or whatever. It hasn't happened, but like this is definitely a thing that you can do. I am very impressed that you managed to make this like a regular occurrence, because when it's been discussed with me, it's been like, let's do this as like a one-time team building exercise, which is also great. If I were more of a hustler,
but no, Matt has the right approach. You don't want to be like the corporate comedian DM, right? Who shows up at the corporate luncheon to do D&D.
This is so much cooler.
You want to just use it to get a good job.
No, this is so much cooler. No. I'm so impressed that you did this, because it's you can be the corporate. Yeah, the corporate comedian or guest speaker or whatever, and like if I were more of a hustler, I would like hang a shingle as like the I don't know, traveling
the corporate DM,
and make them pay me way too much money to do this. But it is cool, and it's absolutely jokes aside, I do think it has. There are dumber things that people do as team building exercises, that
oh my god,
take up more time and cost more money. So it's honestly like not a bad idea if your team is into it.
That's great. Congrats on the new GM adjacent job, Matt, and thanks for checking in.
Yeah.
Here's our next letter from Chris. Hey, DMs, Matt and Rob. I love the pod, and your advice was instrumental in me getting behind the screen. It can be a lot of work, but looking up and seeing a group of your mates having a fun time by your design is super rewarding. I really want to thank you for the shift to reviewing other game systems and modules. I've just recently got my table over to playing Mothership. I picked it up. In no short part due to the enthusiasm you both had for it when you reviewed it on the pod. It's a joy to run. Definitely see the appeal of OSR games now, and I can't wait to try out more. Anyway, thanks for the countless hours of entertainment. Keep rolling those dice. Regards, Chris from Patreon.
Thank you, Chris. I'm really glad that this was helpful and inspirational to you. This is exactly what we want to accomplish. Like we've discussed a bunch, and like we mentioned on this episode, there are a lot of like really like refreshing things about playing these like OSR systems. Things go faster. Yeah, they're deadlier. It's a lot of fun. I think a lot of my players have really enjoyed going back to like a different style of play or going to it for the first time. A lot of my 5e players have been like, oh, this is fun in a way that I didn't even know that I wanted. So I really do encourage people to try it, especially if they are used to playing 5e.
Yeah. I really want two things that I'm really excited about that we have to do an episode on sometime soon is Karn, an OSR system that has like, speaking of fun random life paths, it's got one. And one that like I read like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago that I think now has a second edition, which is Ultraviolet Grasslands. We've talked about before, but we were like, oh, we should do a whole episode on it. It's a point crawl system, and it's weird, and I don't know, feels like a a heavy metal cartoon,
Yeah.
but also an acid trip. It's very OSR and very cool.
We should do that one soon. Yeah, actually, that one looks really cool.
I have the PDF. I saw the hardback of the second edition. I have a PDF of the first edition sitting on the shelf at my local game store, but it was in shrink wrap and I didn't open it. I knew if I was able to open it, I would have bought it. And then I thought about talking to someone like, hey, maybe you shouldn't shrink wrap your books. And then I was like, then I stopped myself. I was like, you're going to be an insane person if you talk to the poor store clerk about this thing that you only care about because you just want to flip through the books.
Anyway,
OSR games. We like them.
OSR games.
Yeah.
We like them, and we've talked about them a bunch. We'll talk about them some more because, like we've been saying, D&D is now. What type of soda do you like? Oh, I'd like a Coke. That's what we mean, and OSR is part of that. OSR is a D&D game.
We also need to go back to the original OSR game that's not D&D and do an episode on Traveler.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. God, sorry. I was just thinking about that. That's not. We've talked about it, but it's a big gap that we haven't actually had an episode on Traveler yet. So look for that soon.
All right. Thanks for the letter and for the Patreon support at patreon.com/dungeonmasternone. Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for the reader mail episode. It was full of interesting ideas. I hope this one is too.
This one's from Josh.
I had a eureka moment when you talked about Ibn Battuta, and I thought I should share it with you. Excuse me. I'm working on a Forge in the Dark setting for my newish players that it is at the core. Travel into uncharted lands as the crew of a vehicle. Love it. Love it.
Yes.
Classic
Amazing.
Story. I have a list of influences for worlds we can build at a Session Zero, Firefly, Nausicaa, Mad Max, Laputa, Jules Verne, etc. And a list of crew types, smugglers, looters, archaeologists, rebels, etc. I've been ruminating about scholars and anthropologists, but I didn't have a frame of reference to pitch the idea. I should have had one. Ibn Battuta is one of my favorite historical figures, and that's the world plus a smidge of Cthulhu and a splash of sci-fi fantasy that I am going for. Now I do.
Awesome.
Also, the Glass Cannon Network's Maybe This Encounter Just Sucks discussion was quite good. They're my favorite actual players, especially since taking on Jared Logan and Ross Bryant from Stream of Blood. I don't know if you've done this before. Have you considered asking listeners to send in their funniest GM fails? Ooh. Thanks, Josh. That's a good one. I have a lot of GM fails of my own.
Yeah.
I could easily populate a whole episode of things that I have done wrong.
So, yes,
but
listeners.
We'll put out a specific call.
Officially. But later, even more officially, send us your GM fails. I will put a label on them in our inbox marked GM fails, you're a failure GM. And we'll read them. We'll read them on the show, and Rob and I, of course, can add our own.
I'll add our own. This is a great idea. Thank you, Josh.
Josh, the only thing I have to say about, besides it sounds super dope, your next campaign is, if you haven't already, check out a game called Wild Sea. It is not dissimilar, and I believe is forged in the dark, and has a full set of rules for ship creation. There's also a free version of the rules. You can find the rules for ship creation on page 102. I think that's where you should go to steal some ideas for your campaign for making, because I see exactly what you're saying. We're going to be the crew of a ship. The ship's going to be kind of like a play sheet, just like the crew in Blades in the Dark. Wild Sea has done that. It has a very specific campaign setting, so that's probably not aligning with your campaign setting, but the ship creation rules will be a great source of inspiration. Check them out.
The other thing that I want to bend your ear about, Josh, is if you like Ibn Battuta and Marco Polo, there's another guy who I think is really cool, William of Rubruck, who was a Franciscan Flemish missionary and explorer.
His grading was really intense. That's where we get the rubric.
It's not Rubruck. Matt,
Oh,
God damn
sorry.
it. All right, he went to Karakoram as part of a expedition to meet with the Khan well before Marco Polo did, and his story is very interesting. It's not as well known as Ibn Battuta or Marco Polo, but if you like a travel narrative, if you like this type of thing, I think it's like a really rich vein. If you're interested in his history, it's inspired a lot of my thinking about campaigns. So check out good old Billy Rubruck.
Billy Rubes. We love him, folks, don't we? He went all the way to Karakorum.
I once
saw the con.
I once went through a very complicated and stressful interlibrary loan process to get his chronicles because they're not like published in English anywhere. Anyway, cool guy though.
Josh, this campaign sounds awesome. Brush up on your medieval Flemish or Latin. I have no idea what he wrote in, but hopefully
Latin.
you get a
It was in Latin,
translation. That sounds dope. Good luck, Josh, and yes, thanks you for the letter. Here's our last one of the day of the pod, and this is from Ryan. Hey, longtime listener here, Ryan. I actually wrote to you guys years ago, and y'all somewhat based an episode off of my write-in.
You are a pirate.
Right. Nautical Adventures. I ended up not running that campaign that I wrote in about.
That's okay. It was fun to talk about anyway.
Yeah. But funny enough, I did run a pirate campaign a few years later that my group has played in for nearly 3 years and just recently took a break from. Anyway, I was catching up on some episodes, and you guys said to send in adventures. Well, I haven't made an adventure, but I have made a few subclasses. I was wondering if you guys could check them out and give me some feedback. I like to throw them on the DM's Guild, but I don't know if they're good enough. One is the Oath of Honey Paladin, and the other is the Warcraft Fighter, based on using origami as weapons. A bit of Naruto, if you're familiar. I look forward to hearing back one day. Thank you, DM Ryan.
I'll take a look at him. Yeah, I mean, yeah. We'll have to see if this becomes a something that we can't keep up with. But I love reading third-party stuff. So if you want to send us something to take a look at, we will take a look at it and give you our thoughts. Far fewer subclasses than I used to, but that's okay. I'll look at a subclass. Sounds fun.
Listen, the key to writing a fun subclass for 5e D&D is mostly to have some cool art attached. The second key is to lean into something very, very specific, because we're now in year 11 or 12 of 5e, and there's a lot of subclasses. So if you want to sell something on the DM's Guild, get really specific and thematic with it, which I think you've done with a Oath of Honey.
I was just going to say that the theme is important. At this point, the mechanics matter a lot less than having like a really strong theme, because you're not going to come up with a subclass that like does anything mechanically brilliant anymore.
Right. There's not room for that in a subclass anyway. But for the most part,
a good theme you could do.
Yeah.
And these sound like a good approach.
I can't comment on the origami fighter thing. I think I'm not familiar enough with the source material. You said it's Naruto. I'm assuming this is a novel of some kind that I haven't read. But Rob doesn't know either. He's stuttering and sputtering.
I'm sorry. I was gonna make a joke that it didn't come together. I know some anime. Naruto, I have not actually seen very much of, if any. Mostly because I no longer have it in me to watch many hundreds of episodes of anything. I hear it's good. There's a guy named Rock Lee. He wears weights on his ankles. I don't remember. That's all I've seen. But it doesn't mean that we can't take a look at the subclass and tell you what we think.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking it was like back when I was teaching high school. I was like, God, if someone, these kids love, speaking of pirates and our
they
previous,
love One Piece, Matt. They love One
Piece.
Love
One Piece. I don't know what One Piece is. I don't know if it's like the One Ring. I know there's like 1,000 episodes and that the kids really like it. And I'm just like, man, if they had a One Piece role playing game, people would really like it. Something may exist already. I should have probably Googled One Piece role playing game before I started talking.
Not.
But yeah,
it's funny. You'd think that an anime about pirates is something that I would at least like have some interest in, and I just couldn't get into it. I just could not get into it. Sorry if you're a fan. My
I know.
tastes
You're the pirate expert, and
I know.
you should be able to watch it and then give us like a 5,000 word like think piece about what actually the 5 truths that One Piece actually reveals about the golden age of piracy.
Unfortunately, I don't think it reveals anything. Maybe I should give another shot. Sorry, not to be.
I
a hater.
don't think you need to, Rob.
Now that we're delving into this, like I can't do the Shonen Jump style of anime. I can't do all the like, I don't know. Okay, I just I don't have it in me anymore. But if you do, that's okay. Don't let me stop you. All my students love Naruto. They love they love One Piece. They love JoJo. I don't know about any of these things, but I imagine they're fun. I imagine if I was 13, I would be into this shit. So who am I to judge?
Yeah. Listen, the biggest untapped market is truly anime TTRPG crossovers. There's been role-playing game systems designed to create an anime feel for time out of mind. Since the first age they've existed. None of them have really taken off. It's always just people being like, we're doing an anime style campaign in another thing. But maybe that says something broader. I don't know. But
we'll have to. This is the larger topic.
Yeah.
We're out of time.
Thanks
you,
for
Ryan.
the letter, Ryan. Thanks everyone for their letters and support of the show at patreon.com/Dungeon Master of None for $5 a month. You can get some more episodes, fun homebrew stuff, and support the show.
And if you have more questions or thoughts, you can always reach us at dmofnone@gmail.com. You can add us on Blue Sky, or you can join our Discord for free and holler at us there.
We know you have a DM fail that is just great. It either makes you look really, really terrible or actually kind of cool. Both are fine. Send it to us.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody, and keep rolling them dice.